I've been talking about it here and there, teasing the idea a little bit, but this is the first official devlog of my new small game project, a match-3 game that I think is going to have some sort of Lovecraftian theme. We'll see how the theme and the visuals and stuff shake out. But today we're going to introduce this new project and talk about what I've gotten done so far. It's actually coming along pretty well, as you can see. Little bug there. That should have matched vertically as well. But hello, I'm Savalian, and first I'll give a little apology. I fell headfirst into a black hole over the past few weeks. I have been playing a lot of Abiotic Factor, really binging it, and on top of that, work has been pretty grueling, so I took a little accidental hiatus from YouTube, and I think work is going to continue being busy for a little while, but I'll try to be a little bit more disciplined here. Also, at some point, I will probably design games at a full resolution instead of testing them at this little tiny window, which for some reason has become my habit. This must just be like the default window size or something, but here we are. Let's talk about this shiny new project, and we're just gonna do a pretty laid back, like voiceover style video today because I'm feeling wiped out. As I said, I've been lost in the sauce a little bit. I was previously working on a fishing game, which you may have seen if you've been here before, and I realized that the scope had gotten a little bit out of control, so I started a small project to give myself a better chance at finishing something. And this was really tough for me. I've talked about this before. I've done a few videos around this design endeavor. I talked about how I brainstorm ideas. I did my small games deep dive to try and figure out for myself what I think makes smaller scope games effective. And I hammered out some ideas, and like a lot of them ended up being like really big ideas masquerading as small ideas. It's a little couple bugs in this still, as you can see, but we're not going to worry about that too much because it's a work in progress. But as you will see for yourself, this game is heavily inspired by Pokemon Puzzle League. I mentioned in my games deep dive that it was one of my favorite games to play when I was a kid. I really like how it feels compared to some other match-3s. It just feels more tense. It really keeps you on your toes. Specifically, I like the limited space that the game board has. I think it creates, like I said, that tension to keep pushing. It's a bit like Tetris because it has the blocks which are falling, subject to some amount of physics, and then it also has this limited space. You do not want to let it reach the top or you're in trouble. And I really like the feeling that creates of needing to go faster and really think through your moves and try to plan things out. I like that a lot. So that's kind of what we're going for with this project. And as I said, the plan for this game is to get it done quickly, so I started by diving right into the match-3 mechanic. You can see it's technically working. There are some little janky bits where blocks don't always fall when they're supposed to. I'm working on fixes for that and sort of smoothing out the system that detects the match-3s. Or 4s or 5s. You can match more than 3 in this game, ideally. But it's not all totally working yet. And with any software project, I recommend spending a little bit of time on architecture, but I didn't want to get too far into the weeds. So I moved forward with a structure where the layout of the game board is entirely separate from the visuals of the game board, and I tried to chunk out the functionality into logical blocks. And I think this is just a good idea for any project to make things more testable and maintainable. So we'll look at just a little bit of code. This is not a tutorial. I know sometimes people are like, I can't read the code here and I don't know how you did this. And that's really not the point of what we're talking about here. If I'm gonna make a tutorial, I'll make sure you can read the code. But this is kind of the main setup that I use, where I have, for most things, it's not necessary for everything, but for most things, I have the code like model or like the backing code, the sort of raw code, and then I have the Godot node that handles anything related specifically to how it is like rendered out or positioned in the engine. This is the engine layer, and this is sort of the code logic layer. And I have the game board as kind of the beefiest piece of all this. It has just grids of the blocks, and it has a staging area at the top where the blocks show up before they fall, and then it has the active blocks, which are the ones you can actually interact with, and then it has a bunch of different events for other things to respond to when the game board state changes. So we have when it's full, we have this. So this will be to handle ending the game when you've lost, when the board is full. When the grid changes size, this should really only happen at the beginning. Maybe we could do something silly with this later, but for now it's just, when the game board is created and given a size, we have to actually show that in the world, and so that's what that's for. Then we have blocks being added and removed for various reasons. Added to staging, added to active, moved, the match removed, so it has a separate event for when it was removed because it was matched, so I can do a different thing with that, different visuals and things like that. And this class handles anything related to the grid and what it does on its own. So we have things like adding the block, making sure there's room for it, sending out those events. We have things like checking if a block needs to be dropped. And I have a very specific reason for doing things the way that I've done them, specifically not just using like physics to pull them down whenever there's room, but actually looking for space in the grid. And that's because I want to add a delay. Pokemon Puzzle League always had a very slight delay before the blocks would actually fall when the space was made available. And that created this very brief opportunity for you to swap things around so that they would fall into another match, creating a sort of combo. So I wanted to have that available. So I have all of the like quote unquote physics is not using actual physics. It's detected in code by checking the spaces below and seeing if there is room there. So we have a couple of different functions here. I'm still polishing up this code, so don't look at this and copy it or learn something specific from it, because this is all very much raw in progress code. We also have code for checking if there's a match. And I realized I did this initially by checking like groups of 3, and then I realized that's not going to let me check for groups of more than 3 if I get a combo, you know, like a 4 or a 5 or even a 6 if you have them side by side. And so I wrote this whole function one way, and then I had to go back and sort of refactor it. So the way it works right now is that it goes across all the rows first, and then it goes across all of the columns, and it starts at the bottom and works its way up so that oh, and I just had a thought about why something wasn't working earlier. I'm going to write this down. But yeah, I've just realized why a certain type of combo is not working. But we're gonna get to all that. Don't worry. But the way that this works is it runs through all of it, and then it removes the ones at the bottom first so that the top ones are able to fall down. But what I actually need to do, which I've just realized, is sort of collect all the matches and then remove them all at once so that I can both add that drop delay, but also so I can get combos that have a horizontal and a vertical component. But this is one of the things I spent more of my time on, just making sure the match 3 stuff was working. And then once I got that done, I started to remove blocks, you know, in the middle of the loop as it was adding and dropping more blocks, and realizing that sometimes it doesn't really detect the drop state correctly. So that's kind of the next piece. But we have the match 3 working at a basic level, and I spent a lot of time on this, refining it, trying different things and seeing if they worked. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I did manage to get some unit tests, some automated unit tests set up. I haven't really fleshed them out yet, but that's going to be a big piece of this, is writing a bunch of unit tests so that I can test for regressions as I continue developing this piece of software. We've got a function here for when we found a match, we need to actually remove those blocks from the grid and make sure we're in the right spot, and then also kick off a drop for all the stuff above it that now has an empty space below it. So we've got some of that code here. We have some more just to check for when we need to drop the blocks. This function here, activate stage blocks, is going from the blocks in the staging area and actually moving them onto the active board. So in code here, it's actually moving it to a totally different like list of blocks, but in the visuals, it just moves the physical blocks downward, basically. We have some things here, adding a block to the active grid, trying to do a swap. So in this one, we basically just check that we're not like going out of bounds. If we have blocks in the spaces, we are actually moving them to a different space and sending those events out so that the UI can update. And then once we swap them, we may have swapped one of the blocks either into a space that has an empty spot below it, or we may have created an empty space by moving a block. So we need to check all of the affected positions to see if we need to do a drop there. And then there's just some things to like get the height of the board and whatnot. So this class handles everything related to the grid, and then it just sends out these events, and then the node responds to those. So we have, if we have the match event, we call a function on the block itself, which literally just removes it right now, if I remember. Yeah, it literally just destroys this block object. Oh, I need to also remove it from the list here. I'm coming up with a lot of things that I can update as I'm talking through this, which is why going over your code with people is just a nice thing to do. It helps you think through things from a different sort of perspective than when you were initially writing it. And sometimes you find the answer yourself. And this is actually called rubber ducking. You could just explain it to a rubber duck and still have the same benefit of talking through your code with someone else, because obviously you're not able to talk back to me right now. So it's, you know, I could replace you with a rubber duck is what I'm saying. But this is all fairly straightforward. If we swap it, we want to call swap. If we want to move the selector, which is the little widget that targets where you're going to do the swapping, we need to be able to get the actual position of that in the world based on the grid position. And so that's what this does. We can try to swap things with the game board. When active blocks are added, we get them from the staging area, basically. And then when it's added to staging, we do actually instantiate the block and position it correctly, add it to our list, things like that. I've been trying to get some of the animations in early so I can play with the feel of the game. So it's not like a full 100% like janky prototype. I want to get some of the like juicy bits in there earlier so I can refine them as I go and see how they feel. So I've been playing with tweens for animating the blocks into different positions in a way that feels good. And the tricky part of this actually was, for example, if I swap a block, it moves horizontally, but then if it needs to fall after that, it may still be moving when I schedule that drop, if that makes sense. And so I've had to figure out how to chain the tweens, essentially. And the way I've done this is actually check if the tween that I'm using is already running and doing something different in that case. And then if not, I just add the tween property values normally. So I may talk more about all this as I get more familiar with it. I'm still kind of learning how all this fits together. But the basic reason for doing some of this was because I was swapping blocks and then they were falling, but instead of moving that way, it was just going straight diagonally down to the dropped spot because it was only using the most updated like tween value. So that's something I had to figure out, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks now that I've got all this in place. And another thing I've done here is that you can see when I add the block for the first time, I'm just instantiating it from like a prefab scene type of thing here. And the way that I've set this up, I've tried to future-proof it a little bit, where instead of hard coding, you know, the blocks, I've got these different scenes, and they're in this thing that I've called a block group, a resource that I've created called block group. And this way, I could have different block groups with different blocks in them, different types of, like, you know, maybe one only has 5 different blocks, one has 8 different blocks. The 5 one would be more easy than the one with 8 because you're more likely to get you know, the same blocks in a place where you can match them. You could even potentially do blocks that have like effects of some sort if I add that as a feature. But what I'm trying to say is I've separated out these groups of blocks so that I can easily swap them in later without having to really do a lot of tweaking. So I've separated again some of the game design from the actual implementation so it can be expanded on, it can be tweaked later. We can do fairly easily because I've split it out in this way. I've also got a resource that sort of defines the timing of the game. So I have these game events. There's a couple different types: block generation, block drop, and then I just have game start, game end. These ones repeat, and so I have this this class. It's the game runner that basically just reads these events. When enough time has passed, it triggers the next appropriate event based on the timing listed in the object. So I've just sort of created this data structure I can use to define types of games. And then this also is extendable. You know, I could add different types of events that do different things. I can change the timing. I have the repeating ones for now, but I also have like single time events where it just like drops blocks one time. And so I can use that to add like more blocks at a certain point. Like maybe you get to 5 minutes and you get a bunch of blocks at once. I think that could be like a little fun thing to watch out for. Now we'll see as I go on and design different levels and things how much of this I'm going to use to its fullest extent, but that's kind of what I've got in place running this game. So I've got the game runner, which handles the timing of events. I have the game state handler, which these names, I had such a hard time naming some of these because like everything I could think of was hopelessly generic and didn't really capture the goal of the class, but I'm doing my best out here. But this kind of handles the actual generation of blocks and interacting with the grid to add them and then activate them. So this kind of launches these events, and then this handles the events by actually, you know, doing what they need to be done. I have the game board, the visuals of the game board. I have the little selector, which lives kind of entirely in node space because there's not a lot behind the scenes of what the selector needs to think about. It literally just moves to different spots, and then when you hit space or whatever key it ends up being, you can try to swap. That's literally all it does. So that almost entirely lives in like node space instead of code space, if that makes sense. And I got all of this sort of working in just a couple of weeks. And like I said, work has been pretty tough, so it's been not a lot of like really intense work on this game, but enough to see the sort of fruits of my actions here. Oh, okay. If a match spawns in, the timing gets a little bit weird. That's another thing I've got to fix, but for the most part, I'm happy with these little swap animations. I think they look pretty nice. They're kind of bouncy, which is what I was going for. And like here's an nope. I was gonna show an example of how the vertical and horizontal match is not currently working, but the game decided to match something else for me. But we do have the 5 combo working as long as it's all vertical or all horizontal. And I think the biggest problem with some of this that I need to fix is that if I do a match right when a new row has dropped, it gets a little bit messed up. And I'm gonna lose here. Yep, I've already lost. I still need to add, this is a silly thing to have not done yet, but I don't have like a frame around the game board, and so I'm actually not totally sure where the top is just by looking. So this is the top. You can see when I try to move outside the bounds of the grid, it does this little shake. And that was an intentional choice to sort of get... I've just realized I can click extra fast to get outside the bounds entirely. But that's, you know, we'll fix that too. Always finding bugs, still sort of play testing it. A lot to do here, but I'm very happy with how it's coming together, as I said. And I am definitely rambling, so we're gonna wrap it up here. And that's just a little look at what I've done for my little match 3 game so far. I'll be talking about it more as I progress and talking about some of the like design challenges, some of the decisions I'm making. So if you would like to see more of that, please subscribe. and like the video, because that really helps me out. I also think, as a little preview for anyone who's still here at the end, I think I'm going to lightly edit my Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop run and upload that here from Twitch, because it's a great game and I loved it so much. I'm predicting now in February. I thought it was still January for a second. It's February. I'm predicting that it's going to be my personal game of the year, which I always select and then pretend as though it actually won game of the year, like Played Up in 2022. But anyway, I really enjoyed that game. It's so beautifully done. It's incredible. It looks good. It feels good. It's a good game. And so I think I want to upload my playthrough of that to sort of save that for myself and for other people to enjoy. So that's probably what you're going to see next, but we'll be back to this game for sure as I make some progress and as I add things, so I can share that process and get a little feedback, a little gentle feedback. But that's all I've got for today. I hope this was fun. I'll be back soon with another video, and I hope to see you there. Okay, bye-bye.